Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another week of Growing with My Fellow Growers. Sorry about last week. We had some technical difficulties with myself being on vacation, but back and ready for episode 200. Happy to be joined, as always, by an amazing panel. I'm going to pass it over first, as usual, to Spartan Grown.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, chat. I'm sorry we missed you last week. I did miss you, but we're back here this week, and it looks like this show is going to be pretty info heavy. So I'm excited to get into it. I'll just introduce myself. I was Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram, all one word, no spaces. There's a lot of fake accounts out there. Make sure you get the right guy. If you want to have to cut through the bullshit, send an email to spartangrown@gmail.com. That's one thing that is all one word, no spaces, and you'll get to me. Other than that, I'll be happy to help you with your gardening questions, organic or synthetic.
Happy to have you back. And yeah, Instagram does weird things with DMs. Puts them in if you're not following that person, sometimes you have to go through multiple layers or whatever, try and allow them to send the message to you, even if it's somebody you might want the message from. But with that being said, yeah, email. I'm actually pretty good about getting to my email as well, jackgreenstock47@gmail.com. So if anybody wants to hit me there, I usually get back within a few days, maybe a week. But I'll always get back to you guys if I see you. A lot of junk mail still gets filtered through. But next up, we've got Dr. MJ.
Hey, yeah, Dr. MJ Coco here from cocoforcannabis.com. 200 episodes, man. I think that qualifies us for a good syndication deal at this point. You know, we can sell off all those in the back library here at this point. No, I'm excited. I've been part of most of that. And, you know, along with Jack Greenstock and Spartan Grown and the American one, sort of short-staffed a little bit here today. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting episode. Check me out on YouTube, where you already are, probably, Dr. MJ Coco, on Instagram, or, of course, over at cocoforcannabis.com.
Looks like we've got at least half the crew here so far. And I think if Matthew Gates is with us, I'll go ahead and pass it over to him next.
Yeah, most of you already know, but it's Matthew Gates, Integrated Pest Management Specialist. So I'm excited. Are we going to be talking some research today, Jack? I at least know some of the ones that we discussed in chat, but I'm excited.
I pulled up
nonetheless.
all of the cheap home grow, whether it was an Instagram post that was covering a scientific article, scientific related Instagram posts, and actual scientific articles. So I've got probably 10 tabs on my browser over here, and they're all pretty science heavy. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 10. I think so. We'll flip through those and see what seems the most interesting. I think a couple of them are from Brandon Rust, who's not currently with us, so I don't think we'll be covering those. But I want to.
I like his Beauveria one.
Okay, well then maybe we'll get into that.
One. Yeah.
But I want to go ahead and introduce the last who's currently with us, and certainly not least, the American one.
What's up, Jack panel and everyone in chat? It is always great to be here. I'm glad to have make it another week. Well, actually, it's 2 now, and yeah, I'm glad everyone's in chat. It's good to see everybody on the American one on the YouTube and the American one _with _Keens on the IG. Most of you know me or know where to find me, but if not, you can DM me on the IG and yeah, go from there. Peace.
Well, we are happy to have you back. And like we mentioned at the top, we're going to be talking about some research tonight. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and without further ado, I'm going to make my browser here full screen. And actually, I minimized it. So before I start sharing screen, I'll go ahead and make sure I have everything set up right. So, all right, here we go. All right, share. So the first thing I wanted to go to was, I think you were talking about a Beauveria paper. So I'm going to try and click over to that. We've got lots of stuff going on this evening. I actually have to minimize because Zoom's controls block the stuff. So I have to just click through like this.
Yeah, I hate when that happens. You guys can't see it, but
at the top of the screen, yeah, there's a bunch of controls that will block out my ability to click on the tabs. So this, I don't think is the one. This is one that Tao sent.
That's a good one too.
So I'll just go ahead and read the article titles, and then we can get some interest from the chat in which one. So I'll just go from left to right. Investigation of microorganisms in cannabis after heating in a commercial vaporizer.
Oh, yes. I like that one.
And then the next article is cannabis glandular trichomes after or alter morphology and metabolite content during flower maturation. Interesting article there. Beyond chemical triggers, this is article 3. Beyond chemical triggers, evidence for sound evoked physiological reactions in plants. This is one that Tao sent us. Exposure in vitro to an environmentally isolated strain, TC09, of Cladosporium sphagospinorum.
Sphaerosphermum.
I'm way off on that, but triggers plant growth, promotion, early flowering, and fruit yield increases. So thank you, Tao, for that one. This is just a person's page, so I think I might have to go back through and find
This person
shared a
has a
post.
lot of research. Yeah, as you can probably see, anyone who's looking at the video can see they've got posts and they have a science article related to each post, and it's a nice comprehensive collection.
This was actually the post right here, the
yeah.
one that I shared. And they actually, I should have before the show gone and looked up the source, but I'll pop that into Google and hopefully we could find that. But if not, we've at least got the information here on their post. They did a lot of breakdown, kind of showing it off, so at least we can flip through that. But I found this one to be pretty interesting as well. The article title is How to Characterize Trichome Phenotypes to Assess Maturation and Flower Development in Cannabis sativa L.
Hey, let me just point out, you see how Jack just copied and pasted? You can copy from the browser and Instagram to get the links that are in posts and comments, just so some people don't know that. They're like, oh, the links don't work in IG. If you open it up in a browser, then you can copy and paste it. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, Instagram doesn't support copying and pasting in the app, but you're right. You can do that sort of stuff on the browser, which I guess is a half win for people.
Another post, it's not necessarily a scientific article. Maybe they do quote a scientific article, but Prima Clones made a post talking about testing for hop latent viroid and the success rate of finding it when the plant was actually infected, and notably pointing out that testing the root had higher success rate than old growth, new growth, or upper clone stem. So we could, I don't know how much there is to discuss about this, and maybe we could get Matthew's input on that and others, but we've got 2 other posts here. I think this was the one that Matthew referenced at the top, the split personality of Beauveria bassiana, understanding the molecular basis of fungal parasitism and mutualism. So that is an interesting one. Hopefully Brandon will join us, and even if he doesn't, we could get Matthew's input and everybody else's on that. And then he keeps pulling up people's pages, but I think he posted a few different scientific articles, but I think it was comparison of terpene profiles in commercial cannabis. And this was looking at like the sun grown, and also wish Brandon was here because he talked a little bit about how I think it was Tina Gordon was works for like Moon Maid, who is one of the people who's Moon Maid Farms here in the study, but this is comparing indoor versus outdoor. So another interesting post with the cannabis related science that we can discuss. So those are the 10, I believe, articles that we've got. And I'll go ahead and click on over to the chat and see what we've got going on. Hopefully it'll work on I don't know if it's going to get like mirrored out, but we've got a bunch of people in here, and I don't know. What are you guys feeling? We've got just a couple of us. I'm going to stop sharing screen for a second and check out the YouTube, but I'll pass it to Spartan Grown. Do any of those sound interesting to you to start off with?
The most interesting one, and one that is the most scary one as far as public health, it's got to be that vaping, the one with the vaping.
Yeah,
one.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Get into, I think.
Okay, so I think we can start with that one, and then we'll go from there and see what we want to jump to next. So that was the very first one, and I'll go ahead and share screen again and click on growing with my fellow growers, even though I'm going to click over to the next tab and then go full screen so I won't be jumping around. All right, so investigation of microorganisms in cannabis after heating in a commercial vaporizer. And does anybody want to go ahead and read the introduction? And then maybe we could discuss from there.
Yeah, I'll do that.
I'll do it because I want to feel myself stumble on this, and then you guys can sound intelligent afterwards if that's fine. All right, so just the introduction, the first paragraph. Okay. There are concerns about microorganisms present on cannabis materials used in clinical settings by individuals whose health status is already compromised and are likely more susceptible to opportunistic infections from microbial populations present on the materials. Most concerning is administration by inhalation, where cannabis plant material is heated in a vaporizer, aerosolized, and inhaled to receive the bioactive ingredients. Heating to high temperatures is known to kill microorganisms, including bacteria and fungi. However, microbial death is dependent upon exposure time and temperature. It's unknown whether the heating of cannabis at temperatures and times designated by a commercial vaporizer utilized in clinical settings will significantly decrease the microbial loads in cannabis plant material. So like my layman's terms in that is like most people will look to vaporizing herb because it's been shown, I was going to say it's thought to, but been shown to be healthier to consume in that way rather than full combustion. But the danger in that, according to this, is that temperatures might not be high enough to really destroy a lot of the bad fungus, specifically, that you would get, that you wouldn't have. I hate to say this to make people think that it's some kind of a way through it, but a lot of that fungus is destroyed when you're actually combusting it all the way, whereas when you're vaporizing it, some of it can persist.
Yeah, absolutely. They mentioned some bacteria and fungi. If you want, if we go down a little bit to the bottom of page 1 and the beginning of page 2, we can go over the results and discussion really quickly, so we have that framework.
Where do you want me to scroll to? Just tell me when to stop.
Oh, go. Are you on? Sorry, I was looking at my own PDF. So go up. Go up more. Yeah. Are we looking at the same thing?
I think the online version gives a brief introduction, methods, and results and discussion. And then if you
the results
down,
and
you get the
discussion, right?
full-
Yeah. Go to the results and discussion. Yep. Go to
Okay.
that one.
Results
And
and
it ekes out a little bit on the second page.
like this top results and discussion or the full one.
Oh yeah, okay. So on the PDF that's split up, but here it's the whole thing. So overall, while there were trends of reduction in microbial counts with heating, these reductions were not statistically significant, indicating that heating using standard vaporization parameters of 70 seconds at 190 degrees Celsius may not eliminate the existing microbial bioburden, which is a great word, including any opportunistic pathogens. When cultured, organisms were identified by DNA sequence analyses. Several fungal and bacterial taxa, or organisms, basically types of organisms, were detected in the different products that have been associated with opportunistic infections or allergic reactions, including Enterobacteriaceae, Staphylococcus, Pseudomonas, and Aspergillus. The first 3 are bacteria. The last one is a fungus. And Aspergillus in particular, we've talked about it on the show before, not great for your lungs.
It's one that we test for in California. Are the other 3 in the testing on commercial product? Do you know?
A lot of times, yeah, because Staphylococcus aureus it can infect your skin. Somebody that I know was recently, they got MRSA through they were at a hospital and they had like a wound that was being treated, and it's not great. So yeah, of course, in this case, we're talking about it getting into your lungs, getting into your throat, and doing a lot of bad things to you that way. And if you're
I'm sorry, does anybody know? It said they gave the example of 70 seconds, which I feel is a long time.
It is a long time, yeah.
At 190 degrees Celsius, what is that conversion to Fahrenheit? Should I just Google that?
Probably, yeah.
Your best friend.
Do it.
It's like times 2 plus 30 roughly.
70 seconds sounds a long
so it's like
time
around 400, 350.
If this is a dry herb vape that we're imagining in this scenario,
I think so. Yeah.
And 70 seconds is not realistic.
They probably count,
which means it's probably worse, right?
Yeah,
It's shorter, yeah. So
Right.
there'd be
way
less
shorter.
pathogen death
Yeah.
during that time.
Yeah.
I really do think, though, that this is probably something that's only going to be significant for immunocompromised individuals. I mean, that's what they're saying in this study. So I don't want everybody to freak out about this and be like, oh, no, we can't vape weed
Can I just
anymore. Yeah.
jump in for a second?
Yo,
Because
Doc, let's scare him. Scare
one
Doc.
It's
one medically
374
approved
degrees. It's
the one medically
374
approved
degrees.
in
That's the
California, at
goal.
least, vaporizer. There's like a UC San Francisco study done with the volcano vaporizer, and it became a medical device. So if you have an ailment in California that is treated by cannabis, you can go out and through your insurance buy a volcano and have it be, compensated or reimbursed somewhat because it went through the scrutiny to be considered a medical device. And to my knowledge, no other vaporizer has yet done so. That
If you can
vaporizer is a
find it.
bag style vaporizer, and it heats up for about 60 seconds to fill a bag. So I think that this study is examining a vaporizer, and it was 374 degrees for, in case you didn't look it up, Spartan, in Fahrenheit. So 374 degrees for 60 seconds to fill up a bag, and then somebody would consume that bag over, one puff or several puffs, depending on their lung
You're
capacity.
thinking they used the volcano in the study.
I
It
think
probably
you're
says
right.
it somewhere, right? It might
Well,
say
we
it
can go down
somewhere.
to I wanted to talk about the
Sure.
methods, but we also have 10 studies, so I don't know how much time we want to spend on each one. But
yeah,
at the
good
same
point.
time,
I don't think we
that
should
would be
try to get
interesting.
through 10 studies. I think
Yeah,
we should
no,
try to
we
get through
touch on the best ones.
however many we get through.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't let that worry you. Let's talk about these as long as they're interesting.
Yeah, as long as the people, and that's I kind of threw them all out there to see what people are most interested in, and I
Yeah.
think we'll take this as long as it feels appropriate, and then we'll move on. But I think right now we're just trying to find
Yeah, it's right
vaporization
there.
and equipment.
I
methods.
agree. I hadn't thought about the volcano specifically
Yeah.
in the bag style vaporizers, but that does sound like what
It
they're.
says it right there.
Yeah, they talk about it right there. Recommended time prior to attachment of the vapor collection bag.
Mhm,
Okay,
mhm.
The volcano stores in Bickle. Here it is, right at the top. A
Yeah.
commercial vaporizer.
Yeah. So that totally makes sense. And I think that I mainly agree with what Dr. Coco is saying here, that like people who are immunocompromised are probably way more, or definitely are way more vulnerable in this way. And
Right.
you're probably right now breathing, especially if you're inside. You should look up, people who don't know this, like indoor air quality is actually a massively underrated aspect of health,
Yeah.
and it's oftentimes not very great. Does it kill you outright? No, but constant exposure
Eventually.
Slowly over
eventually,
time.
yeah,
And
it's not great. So,
Yeah.
but within that point, I want to say that I don't, on the one hand, I don't think that it means that you shouldn't use vaporizers like this. But on the other hand, I do want to say that that constant exposure is not great. And those spores are on your flower, whether it's the dankest organic flower that you're getting, sun grown indoor, which we should do that paper too, or not. Those things are everywhere. They're on you, they're in you, they're around you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you're probably breathing in like 80 plus spores or more, probably way more than that every time you inhale, and your lungs are dealing with that. But
Right.
yeah, like it could be, and some people are sensitive and they develop sensitizations that others don't have. So you can't assume you're going to be the average person either.
Well, I think this is really for people, though. It points this out in the beginning for people whose health status is already compromised and are more likely to be susceptible to opportunistic infections.
Right. I think
these
it's
are people
based
that are
because there
probably
was a death
already.
based on an
Yeah.
aspergillus death based on vaporization in California. It was recommended to a medical patient who then ended up dying based on aspergillus related infection. And that's why I think when Prop 64 came around, they were very heavy on the testing for aspergillus and other things that could, if they're not like detected, but like Matthew was saying, I guess even in trace amounts, they could be just around. But
In concentrated amounts. I think in the air, like depending on where you are, it's always going to be different. But like, I think it concentrates indoor, and perhaps when you're smoking, and yeah. But I don't think that. I'm
Yeah, if
curious.
it's growing
This
on the-
is Dr. Coco can help us out. Maybe I forget, like numbers needed to harm and that kind of stuff. Are you familiar with that
I was gonna-
terminology with medical?
I was gonna say, if it's
dosage.
growing on the flower, it'll be a lot more concentrated when you're inhaling it. I think that's what they're insinuating. It's on the flower that you're growing the opportunistic bioburdens.
I also think that they're kind of more talking about stuff that wasn't tested, and it's probably at much higher levels and could be potentially very risky. And it's just kind of pointing out that, like Spartan mentioned at the top, vaporization, although it is probably for most people like a healthier alternative than inhaling or combusting flower, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not like a cure all. If you are one of those vulnerable people and you don't get lab tested product, then maybe you should be concerned and try and find stuff that would have at least the lowest possible level from the start, so that even if there is background levels, there's the same with, like, if you get broccoli, there's like lead and arsenic and all these other things in every piece of food you ingest. It's just micro trace parts per billion, parts per million. And there's accepted levels that the FDA sets that foods can fall within. If it goes over a certain amount, then it's no longer okay. And even, like, I know somebody, I just visit them, who works in like a lead factory. They do like iron work, but they got their blood tested at the very start, and they're like 0.6 parts per million or billion with lead. But Brandon Russ is joining us. Cool. I didn't meet him. But after working there for however long, they're at like 12, and OSHA's standard is like 50 parts per billion or million. And his company says if you get over 20, they like let you go because they don't want to even risk. But it just shows that there's a level that is acceptable, as scary as that sounds. Like, I'd want to stay at 0.6. And it scares me that when he tells me about all the PPE he has to put on and how hot it is and how it's not necessarily perfect, and they still definitely get fucking lead in their blood.
Wear your PPE, everyone. Yeah.
The people that work in New York
farmers
facilities and have their little cards on them that measure how much radiation they've been exposed to.
That's how we found out Chernobyl happened, or one of the ways we confirmed it, because nuclear scientists would go into their nuke places and they would beep going in. That's kind of strange. And that's why it was, because they already were exposed to fallout.
No bueno, but I want to give a second to welcome Brandon Rust to the conversation. We're talking about a little bit of science tonight. And so go ahead and introduce yourself, Brandon.
Oh, yeah. Sorry for coming in late, guys. I'm Brandon Rust, for anybody who doesn't know, owner of Bokashi Earthworks. You can find me on Instagram, Patreon, and at bokashiearthworks.com.
Happy to have you. And I'll scroll up just so you can see the title of this article. It is Investigation of Microorganisms in Cannabis After Heating in a Commercial Vaporizer. We've discussed the introduction, a little bit about the methods. They used a volcano vaporizer. That's why it might look a little interesting that it was heated up for 30 to 70 seconds at 190, which is 374 Fahrenheit. And we were just kind of discussing the results and how it mainly pertains to people who are vulnerable already. But it's, I don't know. I'm curious what the rest of the panel's thoughts are on what more do we want to look deeper into, any parts like the results, like the extended parts.
Any cool diagrams?
Let me keep scrolling and see if anything pops up.
I think the main takeaway for the, even our average viewer or whatever, is this: in this knowledge, you can use this to your advantage now. If you have questionable cannabis that you're going to considering smoking, put that in your bong and put real fire on that. If you've got
put fire on your fire is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
And then if you've got something that's been lab tested to be free of molds, then you can feel confident that you're okay. You're probably making a healthier decision by vaporizing.
That's a good point.
Can you put that one back up for a second? I don't know if I'm looking at that first image that you put up. I was looking at that. This is how the change in E. coli was affected by heating it to 30 seconds, the blue bars, or to 70 seconds, the red bars. Red or orange, what color is that?
Yeah, orange-ish, I guess.
It doesn't look like either one had much.
To me, that in some cases seems to go up.
So do we know what the alphanumericals are? Can we look at the description real quick?
Probably different samples.
It must be, right?
Yeah. And then the error bars, but like the only way to explain some of those ranges.
They're massive in some of those cases. Interesting.
when you see data like that, it just I start to look for the pattern and to see, you know, oftentimes in papers, people try to make something out of their data instead of just sort of like, look at this thing that's obviously there. So you look at data like this and be like, okay, is there consistent patterns? For example, between heating to 30 or heating for 70 seconds. And there should be, frankly, a fairly consistent pattern that heating for 70 seconds would have a greater change. I don't know. I'd have to spend more time with this graph. And then,
Well, Matthew has mentioned in the past, even
Any event,
smoking won't kill all microbials. So like the fact that the
Surprisingly,
vaporizing,
right?
which one has which microbial, it's just a general number. I think that they're looking at like a CFU count. And so each time that they did this for 60 or 30, however many seconds, it's interesting to see how much it went up and
Alright.
down. Somebody's got an open mic.
I have, that's not
Brandon.
me, but I think we should, what's the takeaway from this? Do we freak out, worry about it, or do we just stop vaporizing, or do we just boil it first? But
Boil it
yeah.
first.
I
If
don't
you're
know.
British,
I
maybe.
want to get deeper into it, and like, how much was there to begin with, and you know, what is the real
Yeah.
danger of any of these things? Just the fact that it wasn't completely eliminated doesn't, like Jack was, to Jack's point about there being an acceptable amount. We may be dealing with sort of fractions of an acceptable amount for most people.
Yeah,
So
I don't
until-
yeah, I don't like that they had, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I didn't like how it was just percent of change. Like, give me something a little more intuitive than that.
Yeah.
you know, if it was a real deadly danger, there'd be more dead people. No, but still, it's not.
That was my argument a while ago
Yeah.
on this show about smoking bud rot bud. I was like, if people were dying left and right by this, then I'd be more concerned.
Right,
But,
much
like,
more
Where's the body
concerned,
count? Yeah.
right? Yeah.
They
Yeah,
would be
we're
But
reported.
still, if you get sick, I'm sure it's not a fun feeling if you get some sort of infection in your lungs, you know, even temporarily, if it can be fixed, you know. I don't know though, but
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think
You're
grow
it's,
your
making me
own
think,
clean
maybe that's what I would
weed.
take from this, is maybe I would want to combust any bud that was sort of sketchy,
I'll say
as
this.
opposed to sketchy with mold or fungus or something like that, as
I
opposed
wonder
to
if a
maybe.
cigarette filter would a cigarette
I was gonna
filter
say the
stop
same
that?
thing. I was gonna be
Yeah.
like, I like to see the cigarette, or like I like to see the loose tobacco version of this, because not because like anyone's making an argument, or I guess some people are, but it would
Well,
be just
they put-
interesting.
They put
It would be
stuff
What's
on,
their
cig-
CFU?
on cigarettes that probably kills all that shit, right?
Yeah, that's
Let's smoke
probably
a
true.
formaldehyde and stuff.
Do some-
God only knows.
You can do some mass
Yeah.
spec before and after as well and see what's
Right.
Well, this at
The
least
research
shows
that-
CFU here. We're looking at aerobic plate counts on trypic soy agar for those who are just listening. The left side is CFU per gram of cannabis. And so each one, placebo, no heat, is a kind of far right bar, and it's always higher than all of the other conditions. So even the low heat settings, the like lowest vaporization, lowest time, reduced pretty significantly, at least halved in, or if not more. Only in experiment 3 did it not cut in half. In experiment,
Notice that orange is gone in all of these, by the way. Placebo 30-second heat versus placebo no heat. Placebo no heat is blue. Placebo's 30-second heat is an orange color, and there's no orange.
That second one to the right, or is that, I can't tell it.
Well, there's like a blank. Did you notice that the bars there's like a blank one? I wonder if that was supposed to be the orange one, or that one perhaps. Yeah, it's. I really don't like what
see the
this
3
happens.
low potencies and the 3 high potencies. I don't see the placebos represented in this chart. So from left to right, that light blue is low potency, no heat, right? It's not placebo, no heat.
Yeah, it must. But look at the experiment one
From left.
at the very,
And
at the
then
very,
there's
very,
6
very
bars.
left. There's at the very, very, very left of exp1. There is a small little tiny little bar.
Yeah. That
we
might be
can't
where
see.
the placebo should be.
Perhaps. Yeah.
In
oh,
experiment
perhaps so.
2, there's a little bar in one position further to the left.
Interesting.
And that's where you would expect to see the placebos. So
Yeah, I think you're
maybe
right.
the
I think
placebo is
you're right.
listed somewhere else because it's just a flat CFU.
right, it's not showing up there.
Figure 2 aerobic microbial counts. Okay, 30 to 70 seconds. It doesn't list it right there directly. I thought it may have. So it's definitely interesting. I think I'm curious, where do you guys want to take this one? Do you want to continue looking more into the study, or do you want to
I'm down with switching. Oh, wait, stop. There's this paragraph here. Go down a little bit. Go down. All right. Okay. So, okay, hold. First sentence of the second paragraph says, for the experiments examining fungal growth samples were played on SDA and PDA. The placebo samples had very low counts, averaging less than 1 colony forming units per gram on SDA, and fungi identified from the placebo samples included members of the genus, and this is why I mentioned it, Cladosporium, Alternaria, Aspergillus, Irpex, Teloromyces, and Gibberella. So, and then on the PDA media, there was an observed, though not significant, increase in fungi recovered from the placebo following heating. I'm going to go through that parenthetical statement. And then they said that fungal genera identified in low potency samples include Cladosporium, Septoria, Didymella, Epicoxum, Alternaria, Lecteria, Gibberella, and Paramyrothecium, Bulera, and Hanella. So this was not just me trying to make myself look impressive, but the Alternaria and the Septoria, and the Cladosporium, these are all pathogenic fungi.
In the air.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're saying is that the sample had nothing on it, and then when they went to heat it up and vaporize it, the atmospheric stuff infected the sample. Is that what's being stated or claimed, or am I misunderstanding?
There was something there, but the
so.
heat definitely increased it, is what they're saying. And that that explains some of the data that I was looking at in the first place. Like, why would 70-second go up or down in different samples? They are saying that, like, the fungi liked it.
It
was like stimulating, but
that is disconcerting.
Live
they got
by
down
the
at
volcanoes.
It's incredible. I mean, in the original sense of that meaning, like, I'm having a hard time believing that 30 seconds of heating something is going to have a measurable increase in the CFUs of. I mean, what do you think?
Where did they run this experiment?
It's really weird.
How bad was the air quality in the experiment room? Because, like, if they had 1 CFU in the bud, is what they're saying right here. Very low counts, averaging 1 CFU for the samples, the placebo samples, which were not heated. And then they're going to go ahead and say, look at this. This is the thing that we're just looking at. I mean, it's not extremely high, but 3,000. These are acceptable.
The high potencies. Okay.
But even, so in Michigan, I think it's 10,000. California, I think it's 10,000, 50,000 for, like, the adult use. So that is, all of these are acceptable ranges, like we were talking about earlier. And some of these are extremely low. I mean, 500, 1,000. And we're talking about 10,000 is passable in most states, even like the strictest Oklahoma, 10,000. So, and then they're more looking for, if you have 1 CFU of Aspergillum, then you fail. So it's not just like a general. So if any of these were Aspergillus, then it would be a fail in California, Oklahoma, and I believe in Michigan as well. So it's interesting. Maybe we'll go to, I think the next thing actually had the composition of yeast and mold counts in the placebo. So this doesn't actually give the thing. One of them had the strains listed, I think. If I go down, okay, here, relative percentage of bacterial taxa. So Matthew might, this is a little bit smaller.
Yeah, we could do.
The whole premise to me, though, of 30 seconds of heat could increase populations makes sense to me in that, think of a compost pile. Those microbes, they get pretty fucking warm temperatures and they get more, they produce faster and more, to a certain point.
But see, the thing is,
seconds worth though, I mean,
I don't see Aspergillus on this list.
Obligate parasite. It's not like it's gonna, I guess it's on the material, right? But it has to, but see, the Septoria, it can't colonize, it can't really colonize or grow on dead tissue, as far as I understand it. Maybe I'm wrong about that one in particular, but I'm pretty sure it has to be on living tissue to, like,
But are any of the banned ones listed? The only one I know is
bad
Aspergillus.
Ones?
Like the ones that are, like, if you have 1 CFU of it, you would get a fail. I don't see Aspergillus on this list. This is the list of things that are present when they're actually breaking it down.
Some places it doesn't really matter, which is unfortunate because it should.
I
Or
don't mean to cut in, but are you guys saying that the test of the CFU count was higher
yeah,
during volatilization?
yeah, we are saying
Vaporization
yeah,
in a
it seems-
volcano.
So let's just
Well,
throw
no,
this whole thing
specifically,
out
Brandon, it
and
didn't.
and
There
just say
wasn't.
that this study is bullshit, because that's not how it works.
That's interesting. That's an interesting point to make, but
It's kind of where I've been going with that for a few minutes. Is I have a hard time believing that 30 seconds of heat is going to have a stimulating effect on bacteria or fungus. I mean,
No.
it's gonna.
I don't know. I don't think that's
kill
what,
them, but it's not going to like
These
grow them.
Look at those bacterias and fungi mentioned aren't like thermophilic bacteria. These things aren't.
so you
aren't
don't
gonna
think temperature has any effect on them, is what you're saying?
Yeah,
because
I think that they would
thermophiles
destroy
require.
them. It will destroy them. It wouldn't increase their colony forming units.
So what you're thinking, maybe this could almost be like a flashback to one of the cups that happened recently,
This is
where
look at
potentially
I'm
they vaporized it, and then maybe the scientists handled it with their hands or breathed on it or took it out into an area that had a certain amount
I find that
afterwards.
really doubtful.
or it could just be like my wife thinks that they are trying to put out false information because eventually they want to try to make people pasteurize weed, because that will take out a lot of small businesses.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't know about that specifically, but I'm sure I'm aware of
Old
several
words.
efforts to try to take out smaller cannabis businesses by making it sort of
Certainly
more
easier
expensive to
ways.
cultivate.
But
Yeah.
with disinformation is a great tool if used properly.
Yeah, except
Well,
that
and this
most
is
people,
McKernan.
Brandon, come on, most people
McKernan
don't look at
has,
this.
I will say, he has there's conflict of interest right here. Kevin McKernan has medicinal genomics, and he does
Kevin McKernan's
cannabis,
a reviewer for this paper, in fact.
he does cannabis testing for aspergillus and other types of mold, mildews.
Huh.
He even tested cannabis for COVID. He was one of the people who made it so that cannabis could be sold during COVID, because if it was going to be, he was trying to prove that it didn't hold COVID on it and transfer it to the person that was being sold to, like in a package or whatever, and made claims that it wasn't something that was transferring COVID. But he's done lots of research. But the fact that he works for a company, he owns a company that does lab testing, I think that shows at least there's a little bit of conflict of interest. But that being said, I don't think that it makes it 100% like junk science. Maybe there's something to it.
It should be
They're just
disclosed
citing this
somewhere.
person.
So if you read the
It's to close
should
at the
see
top.
that
Go up to the top
disclosure.
of the page. Go to the top of the page. It's right there. Reviewed by Kevin McKernan and Jahan Marcoux. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah.
But that's interesting
where
that
is this Frontiers and Cellular?
There's no way it increases.
I
You don't
think-
vape weed and then
Those are
increase
just the peer reviewers. They don't really. They're not going to be the ones that are influencing what the articles. Like,
Yeah,
is
exactly. They're just
about.
citing
think-
they're just citing McKernan's research in that paragraph. That's all they're
You know what?
doing.
And that's
Okay.
why he was
Brandon
invited to be a reviewer.
in Brandon West's
That actually makes
defense,
sense.
I think
It's why they
Canada
invite people to be
requires-
reviewers. They're like, they're trying to find people that know what the hell you're talking about in these articles.
It's hard to
Otherwise,
find
it's
people
very
who do
esoteric.
research in the
Then
first
they're like, that would
place.
be a good person to review this.
Dude,
I will
doesn't
admit it's-
Canada require radiation of all their cannabis?
Is it Canada?
I don't know if it's required, but they have a certain testing level that's so low that so many of them consistent,
think-
like the commercial producers do it. It may be
Yeah,
required.
they have to, even if they don't have anything bad on it. Yeah.
Maybe they
So
have some
these-
ideas in the discussion. Why don't we look at the discussion section? Maybe they address this weirdness.
In a related argument here, sort of about this, though, this is the type of study that starts with an interest. It doesn't start with a problem. It's not like there's a bunch of immunocompromised people that are getting sick and we got to figure out why they're getting sick. And that led to this research, right? This research started with an interest of like, I'm interested in seeing if, all the bacteria is eliminated when we vape, cannabis.
Or like how much it goes down.
It's just a fundamentally different kind of research. And you should naturally be more sort of suspicious of that, because it's where people go to make points. It's where people go to grind axes. They have an interest. It could be a financial interest or some other interest in having this point be made. It's not that they're trying to solve a problem or investigate a problem.
Yeah, be leery of all of it, Doc. I don't trust anything anymore. That's my motto.
I think it's good to be skeptical, but you gotta accept
it
something.
depends. I think you can analyze these things.
I feel like
and be more or less confident in them.
I feel like it's very important to be skeptical because even weird stuff gets past. And ever since hearing about that, you'll hear about people who, to make a point, will submit research that's totally wrong on purpose, so that it gets through, and it's totally ridiculous. So it does happen.
Eating chocolate makes you lose weight.
Yeah, or tea makes you lose weight, or whatever.
Yeah.
If they say trust the science, that's when you ignore the scientists.
I don't know about that.
As a
You can say that about
scientist,
anything.
I'll push back somewhat on that, but I'm not gonna. I mean, I understand why you guys are concerned about this, but it does start to sound like just a rejection of knowledge at a certain point.
Yeah,
and
I think science is so
I'm very
important, and
afraid.
good science is amazing when it's done right, and that's why I think we should evaluate. That's why we're highlighting these shows. We've done several shows like this. We're 40 minutes into talking about this specific article, and I think that it's important that we go through it and try and understand it, because if laymen and even people with PhD level degrees can't come to an understanding of the conclusions when reading the full paper with the results and discussion, then I think it's going to be tough for the general people in the public to understand it. So we're all just trying to better understand it, and it may be great science, it may be somewhere in between, and it may just be something that we want to disregard. But I think that it's worth delving into it, seeing what they're claiming, and then trying to figure out how valid it is or isn't, and if it would be something that might replicate, or if it is. I think that there's a lot of good
That's
science.
a good point.
I'm a big advocate of making sure that we try and be skeptical, but also when stuff is done well, accept it, because that's what made us. That's why most of us are growing with LEDs, and we understand like an EC range and a pH range. Guess who figured that out? Scientists. And the reason that we have a warm house and all this other shit, it's like science and engineering has got us to where we live right now in modern society. So it's not like it's all bad. Like, it has saved countless lives, and it keeps us all moving forward. So definitely we want to be pro good science.
If we want to read, if you want, we could read I want to read the latter half of this first paragraph, because traditionally, usually you put all the good, juicy, important stuff in the first paragraph, and we'll see. And then if we want to, we should probably move to another research board. What do we think? Should we read that last part, or should we go?
Let's close it out.
Let's close it out.
It needs a bow.
Okay. So it says, with this minimal microbial background, the placebo was chosen for the spiking experiment to optimize and assess the microbial recovery from cannabis materials. This lack of microorganisms limited enumeration challenges that may occur if there was a high resident microbial population to account for. E. coli was E. coli was used for spiking experiments since it was a marker for fecal contamination and may be encountered in outdoor growing settings and with product handling. And there's some cited research that supports that. The comparison of the amount of E. coli recovered from the spiked product versus the E. coli reference suspension used for the spiking showed that the recovery was 101.7%, which is that standard deviation of 20.4%, I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
The spiked amount indicating that the recovery technique was efficient for extracting microorganisms for the cannabis materials. That didn't really explain anything, unfortunately. But yeah, why don't we wrap up and go to another one? Unless we really want to tackle it. I don't want to.
Yeah, I'm good with this one.
Yeah, I think it's one that we can move on from, and it's just interesting. It gave us insight that we don't necessarily know everything just yet on that particular thing. So I'm going to go ahead and X out.
Good data point.
Documents.
We'll see what comes from that.
Yeah, and we could always follow up if people are interested. We can look more into it later on. And I think do we want to go with the cannabis glandular trichomes, or go ahead, tell me what we want to do.
I think we should do the indoor versus outdoor one. I think a lot of people found that one highly stimulating to talk about. Let's not make the people wait for that one.
All right, so here we are on Sun-Grown Mids page. Shout out to Trevor, I think is his name. Cool guy.
Trevor Witka.
Yeah, he's interesting. I like to follow this individual. We've got Matthew with a comment right here. 36 likes on that. So Matthew, why don't you go ahead and introduce this paper for the people.
Yeah, no problem. In fact, why don't I do this? Why don't I share I have the version of that one, I think. Oh wait, what's the title? I have it on my database.
I think I remember this one.
Yeah, I was actually saying that I was hoping that you would show up because you had a good point about the fact that one of the, I think the third author, Tina Gordon,
Conflict of
is
interest.
part of Moonmade Farms, who's a sun-grown person. But again, although the science might not be perfect, I think it's still an interesting research article to go through and discuss, just to see at least
Yeah.
what their findings were, and then
There was a
try and-
bunch of stuff in this that threw like a lot of red flags when I looked through it.
All right, so Matthew, you said you have a copy of it, and then you could go ahead, share the screen, and then kind of give us the backdrop. I just kind of flipped through. And,
Did you
give
did
a
you hear the
general-
part where do you have the title?
Oh, that's what I did not find that quite yet. Comparison of the cannabinoid and terpene profiles in commercial cannabis from natural and artificial cultivation. It appears to be posted in Molecules 2023.
So I'm assuming artificial cultivation, they just mean indoor.
I think so. And while we're waiting, wouldn't it be different like every year, like wine? That dated wines from different years are way better than other years.
That's true. In some regard.
Yeah.
Like if there's a big fire, for example, I know because my wife purchases a lot of Northern California outdoor or sun-grown or greenhouse. And a few years ago, there was a huge fire, and the outdoor wasn't as good as it was when, the past year there wasn't major
The
fires. And
campsite Kush, man. Had that little smoky flavor. Good stuff, man.
some people like it, I guess.
No,
I think it just doesn't make it to market.
but
I didn't
you know-
come across a lot of it, but you just saw a lot less of the
It makes
product.
it to market, just
There's
not-
so many
not the Cali
variables.
market. It goes,
So many
it goes east.
variables. You
I
can
think
pick
that would make them
apart
fail.
most-
A lot of the fire stuff, probably because when
Yeah.
stuff burns, like trees and stuff, there's all sorts of pesticide, and who knows what was sprayed on, and it melting plastics and metals and things like that. So
Also get some potash on some free fertilizer. All right, looks like Matthew's got it. There we go. I'm gonna shut
All
up.
right.
we're here.
So comparison of the cannabinoid and terpene profiles in commercial cannabis from natural and artificial cultivation. The authors are Zand Karimi, Decatur, Casali, Gordon, Skibola, and Nichols. And yeah, here are the folks here. Abstract says, interest in cultivating cannabis for medical and recreational purposes is increasing due to a dramatic shift in cannabis legislation worldwide. We already knew this. Therefore, a comprehensive understanding of the composition of secondary metabolites, cannabinoids, and terpenes grown in different environmental conditions is of primary importance for the medical and recreational use of cannabis. We compared the terpene and cannabinoid profiles using gas liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry for commercial cannabis from genetically identical plants grown indoors using artificial light in artificially grown media, or outdoors grown in living soil and natural sunlight. By analyzing the cannabinoids, we found significant variations in the metabolomic profile of cannabis for the different environments. Overall, for both cultivars, there were significantly greater oxidized and degraded cannabinoids in the indoor grown samples. Moreover, the outdoor grown samples had significantly more unusual cannabinoids such as C4 and C6 THCA. There were also significant differences in the terpene profiles between indoor and outdoor grown cannabis. The outdoor samples had a greater preponderance of sesquiterpenes, including beta-caryophyllene, alpha-humulene, alpha-bergamotine, alpha-guanine, perhaps, and germacrine B relative to indoor samples. And I'm going to go to this. I think they have a pretty swank diagram that we can take a look at. I remember
So right
correctly.
off the bat, the first issue is with the authorship, right? A lot of the people are invested in the outdoor grow space.
Yep. There's two
Correct.
farms on there that are outdoor farms publishers, and then they're looking at synthetics versus organics, and they're not giving it an even playing field, because if they were doing organics indoor under something like LED, and they're doing similar cultivation styles and, you know, making sure that the genetic material was the same, I don't think it had any of that in there. It was like a salt grow in indoor versus an outdoor or organic grow. So of course the metabolites of the plant are going to be different. I mean, you can change the metabolites by changing the bacterial and the fungal colonies that are in the soil, because some of those things will change the genetic, you know, coding
Expression.
for resistance
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So
I mean, inputs by themselves, even if devoid of the microbial input, you know, just nutritional input and media that you're growing in is going to have, you know, patent effects, right?
All of that
So,
needs to
so
be kept as
immediately
similar as
those things right off the bat, the combination of that plus the authorship with the conflict of interest just null and voids this whole thing, in my opinion. But it's interesting, it's fun, yay. I mean, but that's how I personally
is it null
feel
and
about it.
void, or is it interesting, Brandon?
It's interesting, but I don't think that it's like they're trying to make a point to say that outdoor is better, right? It has more cannabinoids, more terpenes, but they're not giving it a level playing field, right? They're versing it versus something that's not in the same realm of cultivation.
I feel like the title isn't appropriate. I wouldn't have used this title. I understand how important it is for researchers to like make a catchy, pithy title. I understand that you want, just like everything, you want more people to look at it. The title is Comparison of the Cannabinoid and Terpene Profiles in Commercial Cannabis from Natural and Artificial Cultivation.
Yeah. As if they're growing outdoors natural, right? Farming outdoors is natural.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
They're both artificial sort of. They're both constructed.
I mean, that for the point that they're trying to make as far as the authorship goes, that's my thing. That's why I say I don't give it any credence. I'll give it credence. Obviously, the dynamic between something that's synthetically cultivated and something that is outdoor is going to be dramatically different. But to say that it's better, that's a fallacy, because there's too many factors involved to be able to come to a conclusion.
And you can grow indoors so many different ways synthetically. You could.
I want to comment on that question of whether it's interesting or sort of not worth the time. You know, if we're suspicious of the reason an article was written or is being put forward, if it may be propaganda rather than science, and the line between that's probably not as big as a lot of people would want it to be. It becomes dangerous. We you know, and I've thought that with some other things when we talk about it, even though everybody is sort of like on board with the fact that we don't necessarily agree with this, or it's not a good thing to do, just sort of breathing life into some of these things. Some people will walk away and think that this is sort of decent science. So, I mean, I'd just like to put that out. It would be an interesting question to look at how some of these differences affect cannabis, but this doesn't seem like a study that was well set up to actually draw verifiable conclusions from.
And here's the issue that I've already seen. I've already seen people starting to quote this. People that don't, that are saying, "Oh, look at this is why outdoors better." Blah blah. blah. And it's like, look at you. You don't know
their bias.
And so the thing is it gives on the front, right on the front, it gives a different impression than what it really is. And someone who's not versed in understanding white papers or really understanding like cannabis nutrition and stuff like that, for instance, or really understands the cultivation practices for both indoor and outdoor, they're not going to know the difference. And so they're going to walk away with an assumption that could be incorrect.
Well, this is bad science in that if more than one variable has changed, as a scientist, you don't know how to attribute the differences in outcome. So they're saying this is just because we went indoor versus outdoor, but like 17 different things changed. And then they're going to say the one that mattered is the one that I say mattered, basically. Right?
Let's say why it's bad. Let's do that more.
What they should have done, I'll tell you, what they should have done is grown it in the exact same soil, the exact same watering, and just use sunlight and artificial light. That would be one part. And then they do even other things where they just use all living organic soil in both, and then both synthetic nutrients with no dirt, like just perlite or something like that. And that would be a better look at it, right?
Even
I think so.
It's not going to be
the sunlight has more effect that we don't understand. It makes it better.
Right. So you can't get it back to saying that it's indoor versus outdoor. If you change the lighting, if you changed all these other things, then it's more than just sort of, are these plants grown outdoors or are they grown indoors? If you're going to try to do this as well as you could set it up, setting up the indoor grow is going to be hard. I'd want to ask those questions about how much, what ppfd are we trying to hit here? Are we doing sort of a sunrise sunset sequence? Are we going to try to mimic the lighting that the other plants are getting outdoors? Are we going to go with sort of industry leading practice in terms of how much light we're applying? There's like a lot of decisions that you have to think through really carefully, and in order to understand what you're measuring in the end. And it's very hard to do something where you could neatly tie up a bunch of different variables like that. So,
and even if you do,
this is quite clearly sort of interested science, meaning I think that people are trying to make a point that they wanted to make by doing the experiment this way.
I agree with you. And, and even if you do, like anyone who knows Karl Popper, right? Like, even if you control all the variables you think matter, you may not be controlling variables that you're not even aware of, right? And we've gotten a lot better at that, right? But, I'd like to draw our attention to this particularly scientific phrasing here, where they say that in the study, this is in the discussion section, results and discussion. In the study, we use commercial cannabis samples that are cloned from a common parent, but which are grown both indoor and outdoor under optimized conditions, is how they put it. They said that the outdoor samples were grown in raised beds using a proprietary mixture of all natural soil and compost under full sunlight. The indoor samples were grown under artificial light in a proprietary growth medium.
Can you say more about either of those things, like what the artificial light was or what the proprietary grow medium was?
I have to imagine that they do. But one thing that they say as well is that the outdoor samples were stickier to the touch and were much more pungent than the indoor samples. Just want to slide that in there. Just want to make that point. The morphology,
it's like a snake oil pitch.
The morphology and the colors of the flowers were similar. Each of the samples.
Wait, are they saying this in the description of the experimental design?
This is in the results and discussion section.
Okay.
Each of the samples was from the same season to eliminate issues of large differences in age between the samples. Okay. Therefore, we can assess the importance of the two environments of the terpenes and cannabinoids metabolite composition of the two cultivars. I mean, aren't the cultivars different between the indoor and outdoor, right, Brandon?
They said that it's cloned. They said it was the same clone, so.
Clones from the same mother.
But they said...
They did multiple different strains, though.
Okay. Yeah, okay. But I wanted to make sure.
They took clones from the same mother for the indoor and the outdoor plants.
That's good.
Which at least that was standardized, but I think the medium not being...
the media, the fertilization...
and when you have a farm that is going to say, hey, we're proprietary, so we're not going to tell you what our soil mix is, and even if we wanted to, we couldn't recreate it because Moonmade and many other farms aren't like Bokashi Earthworks necessarily, where they're going to be lab testing it every single week and know exactly what is in the soil. A lot of these people are kind of, going with what they have locally, what works best, but it's not an exact science or measurement in that type of cultivation setting. So for them to try and recreate it, good science, I think it's recreatable.
This.
You need to make it like a bakery where you can go and say, we did this. Like Brandon has YouTube videos of making his soil. He says this amount of quarts or, gallons of peat, and then perlite, and then you can make a mix as a standard base, and then disclose that, and then use that in the indoor and the outdoor. The thing that we should do is discuss what they messed up. They didn't do that, and other things they failed to control.
The whole design is wrong. So if this was really a research question, which is better, or indoor or outdoor cannabis, or what are they trying to say? It's not just which is better, but which has more terpenes, or which is something like that. The correct way to evaluate that type of a question is with a large sample size, not with an experiment. So you would go out and gather a huge sample of, outdoor and indoor grown cannabis, and then you'd probably do a randomized sample of what you were able to acquire, and you'd measure that. And that's how you answer questions like that about sort of the real world. You wouldn't try to
I think
set up
issue.
an experiment where you're growing the plants the same way for that question. I mean, maybe you have another question, like how does this particular input change something, or removing this particular input change something or whatever. Then you would set up a specific experiment with the control, keep everything else consistent, and change that one thing, measure the results. But I mean, this is just a flawed research design from the word go. If you were presenting this to like a dissertation committee, they would tell you that this is not the way you would answer this question.
So I just wanted to point out, like, there's a thing called the grow off, and the way that they determine the winners, and I know it's not exact science, and they have a bunch of different cultivation settings, but their determining thing, if we're going to say like what's the best, well, then they have to set a bar for best. So they had highest cannabinoids overall, and then highest terpenes overall. So it was like most potent and then best flavor was the two categories that they had. So in this, if they wanted to just like set an objective out there for that, not to say that that actually makes the cannabis better quality necessarily, but if they're going to put a number out there and try and shoot for it, at least you have a number. Then you could say the indoor produced 30% THC and 4% terpenes. The outdoor produced 25% THC and 8% terpenes. And then the people can decide what they like for themselves, or maybe it's 35 and 5 or something, and it's just outright better in both of those categories. And even in that case, I think sometimes people will prefer the one with the lower numbers. But all that being said, I think it could be done better. And I think that I'm glad that we're highlighting what's not done right about it.
One of the things too that I want to mention is that most science white papers, when they have all the testing or the methodology on how it's done, they do that so that it can be replicated,
Right.
that way so it can be proven over and over again by another person to be able to measure and get those same results. If you were to look at this paper, there's no way you could do that, because again, they make it so that it's impossible. So again, it just devalidates this paper, and it kind of shows you that like this paper, the last paper, they're both things that I'm looking at like, hey man, this is probably not, good, like valid information. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So we have to be
I would
really
say
cautious.
This is worse than the first paper.
I would say that
worse.
I would say that I had scoured the materials and methods section, but there's not enough materials and methods section to call it such. I did not scour anything. This is the entirety of it. I cursorily looked at it and I found this information. 2 commercial cultivars of cannabis were analyzed: red velvet and cheetah piss. The outdoor samples were part of the 2021 seasonal and commercial grow by Ridgeline Farms. The indoor samples were grown by grandifloragenetics.com for RV, which I guess here means Ridgeline Farms, right? And by cookies.com for the CP samples. So they have RV outdoor and CP outdoor, apparently. The outdoor samples,
I think cookies, and then there was like Moon Valley as I think another one of the authors on there, which are both outdoor farms.
Moonmade Farms.
Yeah, the outdoor samples were grown in raised beds using a proprietary mixture of all natural soil and compost under full sunlight, whatever that means. The indoor samples were grown under artificial light in a proprietary growth medium, whatever that means. And I definitely
whatever either of those means.
Yeah,
and what kind of fertilizers? What kind of what? Like
how do you have an actionable?
Shout out to Berkshire Bud, who's everybody knows from the chat there, but he's been like Skyping me, and I keep getting these messages popping up on my screen. He wants to point out that there is like no other description of how they grow, like Matthew's saying, and that the sample size for a lot of their call outs is 1 plant.
How are you
All right, let's just scrap this. It's junk. Let's
what
move on.
actionable-
So
Throw it in the trash.
What actionable derivations do you make from this research? What could you possibly derive from this information that would inform your
I
decisions?
got
about
some lessons that
cultivation?
we can all learn. Be
Yes, that's for
suspicious
sure.
of this kind of research, right? Be suspicious of that. Look exactly what Brandon did right off the bat and looked at the authors and realized that they had conflicts in that. And that, you know, challenge yourself, like, okay, what's the question that they're trying to answer? And is this a good way to try to get that answer? I mean, does this make sense what they're trying to do? And, you know, did they set up an experiment that is going to be able to sort of give them the type of data that they're talking about in their paper? As you can see, a lot of it kind of falls apart after a while.
Pretty
I'm not
easily.
familiar with this journal, but Burke also mentioned that this should never have been approved for publication. And, you know, I'd be interested to talk to Dr. Zandacarini, who is the lead author, the credentialed academic on this.
He's just a pothead.
And understand sort of, or maybe even just do a little research into what kind of research he does in general.
I was just
Yeah.
But
it pains
the
me.
rest of the people seem to have interest in this going a certain way.
I want to wrap this up by saying that it incredibly pains me to say this, because despite all of this, totally, and I think I have no problems or qualms with being critical, because this criticism is constructive. I've had Moon Made Farms product before. It's really good. It's really, really good. I want to just make that point. I just want to say it's some of the best I've ever had.
That's the other side of this.
That doesn't make the research valid. And I think that that's why it's so painful to me, because I think that in a more better constructed research, I think they would still do really good. But I don't, you know, this is not really the comparison that the title sort of talks about. So let's go to the next one. Maybe the Beauveria one would be best.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good one if you want to pull it up.
Yeah,
Is that the one that I put in the chat?
Yes.
Yeah,
I like the
man.
pictures in mine.
That was a good one. I like that one.
I will say
Some
though,
good diagrams too.
a lot of markets now have legal testing, so the consumers are already sort of voting with their dollars and purchasing things based on test results, whether it's terpenes or cannabinoids, and they're seeing. You can look at the sales, how much
We're gonna
sales
be-
of indoor, how much sales of outdoor, and people like their certain brands, and a lot of people float to one or the other, and some people like myself enjoy both, and greenhouse and everything in between. So
I really like this paper, one, because I'm a huge fan of Beauveria bassiana. I use it. It's part of my SOPs for all of the people that I work with. It's one of the things that, you know, I love it. I just love it. It's a great biocontrol agent, and being able to see some of this research that I had found on, you know, how it changes its metabolism is pretty awesome. And it also shows that it can have benefits beyond what I originally was using it for. So it can also help suppress, you know, other pathogens and not just be an insect pathogen.
good point. And Matthew, do you want to
Okay,
introduce this
go.
article, or does
I feel like I should do an iceberg video about this Beauveria bassiana. Like, there's surface level stuff people understand, and then there's stuff, you know, below the surface that, you know, people don't realize. So yeah, I'll talk about the abstract here. It says fungal pathogenicity toward insects has independently evolved several times, resulting in specialist and generalist pathogens, some of whom have maintained aspects of their previous lifestyles. This will be very important for Beauveria. Being able to grow as an endophyte, which means inside the plant, engaging in a mutualistic interaction with plants, or a saprophyte by recycling nutrients back into the environment. The generalist or broad host range fungus Beauveria bassiana does not need to rely on insect hosts to complete its life cycle. Very crucial. The diverse lifestyles of this fungus, saprophyte, pathogen, and symbiont, which is sort of unnecessary to say, but whatever, provide a unique system with available genetic tools to examine host pathogen interactions, plant fungus mutualistic relationships, and fungal development. This commentary highlights overlooked pathogenic and mutualistic aspects of Beauveria bassiana that assist this fungus in shifting along the saprobe parasite mutualist continuum, addressing these knowledge gaps and scrutinizing valuable players driving such a spectrum of ecological interactions will enrich our knowledge of fundamental environmental microbiology and help develop new approaches to pest control and sustainable farming. You know, I love to talk about this thing. It's the number one thing that people get wrong about the microbiome, which is that things can change and things can change dramatically. And it doesn't necessarily matter if it's an aerobic environment or an anaerobic environment. It really can happen for reasons that you have no control over, and sometimes they can be facilitated. So here's this really cool diagram. I could explain it. I could read the whole figure description here, but I think it's a great way of showing all the different things that Beauveria can do. The first sentence in this figure 1 says, it's the transition of Beauveria bassiana along the saprobe mutualist parasite continuum. So it's naturally present in soil, and it can get established in plants, as you can see here, which can have plant immunity effects, and it can interact with beneficial insects via volatile organic compounds. That's what VOC stands for here. It can interact with insect pests in obvious ways by killing them via the production of volatile organic compounds, or maybe as a facilitator for those as signals for beneficials by creating toxins and by directly parasitizing their bodies. And here's an example of them growing on a caterpillar here. And it penetrates through the cuticle, it gets into the body and infects it. So lipid assimilation hydrolysis, so it basically dissolves the cuticle, it dissolves the fats in the insect. That's really bad for that insect. Gets into the hemocoel, which is basically the blood guts of the squishy insides of the insect. And then it produces toxins and kills it, right? Then it, as you can see, it fluffs over with a bunch of mycelium and spores. It produces a bunch of antagonistic compounds in order to achieve that objective. And then it recycles those nutrients back into the soil, right? Similarly, when a plant dies, the plant litter decomposes and there's a saprophytic effect as well. So Beauveria has these effects. And to be quite honest with everyone here, this is what I'm trying to be very articulate about with regards to some of our pathogens. Some of these endophytes in our plants, they're beneficial for the plant while it's there, and then they decompose the plant. This is how powdery mildew and some other pathogens got their start. They're from ancestors that did one of the things, and then they got really good at doing the other thing over evolutionary timescales. So,
and it's interesting too, because I think that there's a lot of different types of microorganisms that people don't realize they can change their modes of metabolism. You know, trichoderma,
even your own cells.
You can ferment trichoderma to, produce more trichoderma. Like, people don't normally think about that. They think of that as a stratophytic fungi. That's in aerobic soils breaking down organic matter. But there's different, like, all of these. It's wild at, how when they need to change, they can adapt. And then these things are so highly adaptive in nature.
I want to say that although that is true that they can adapt quite a bit, that they already have these functions. They don't necessarily create new functions that they didn't already have. They already had it latently. And when they are exposed to an environment for which they have the genetic repertoire to handle, then they kind of go that route. They switch over. And also if you ferment or if you produce some of these microbes as biocontrols, and you get them on a substance that is not their host, like an insect host, for example, then they actually will lose those traits. It's been found. And I've talked about this several times on the show. You got to be careful.
I think I saw where they were doing solid state fermentation, and they were using insect chitin as the substrate, so that way they wouldn't lose efficacy on the process.
Yeah, because that would help them. Like that would sort of incentivize keeping or selecting essentially for them to continue to be able to degrade the cuticles of the insect exoskeleton, for example. But by the same token, though, there's other aspects besides cutin degradation, like challenging the immune system of the insect, where if they don't get to do that, if you don't refresh the colony with this sort of genetic admixture, then you'll start to have a bite with no teeth, if that makes sense, because insect selection pressures are, as we all know, highly pressurized. And so yeah, you could fall behind the wayside if you don't do it right, or if you're sourcing for somebody who just like grows it on agar and they're just like, hey, got you some Beauveria, it might not be as effective. But this requires several generations, right? So there are such things as like auto inoculation traps, which are these fantastic devices where basically you bait a trap and then you dope it with Beauveria spores, and then insects come in, like maybe houseflies or something, and they get all those spores all over them, way more than they need to have a very lethal encounter. And then they fly around and they die somewhere else, and then they establish in the local environment. It's sort of an uncontrolled way to do it, but there's some interesting ways that they've been deployed. They've also been deployed on the bodies of like predatory mites, and then they deploy the mites, and then the spores get transferred onto some pests. I think I saw this with scale and mealybug in a research report, and it caused severe mortality, even though the predatory mice won't go after the mealybugs. It was just simply by walking over their bodies, enough of them got transmitted. So cool, novel techniques like that, I think, are very interesting and a very clever way to make use of this organism. Not only that, but the endophytic effects, like Brandon was talking about.
How much of
because
the
my understanding too, as an endophyte, if you have a large colonization within tissue, if you get an insect that essentially penetrates the cuticle of the leaf and ingests some of these microbes, then essentially they are able to be parasitized that way as well.
Spartan,
Yeah,
what did
exactly.
you want to say there?
I was wondering if the BB ever has been known to parasitize like predator bugs.
Sometimes, especially like soft-bodied insects that are very closely related to like Arius, for example, minute pirate bugs and things like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that does happen. And they also can colonize some other things too. So it's important to consider. I think that's actually one reason why the United States is not keen to use Beauveria in that. I think that in Europe they might use it with honeybees or bumblebees. I'm forgetting now in the moment, but they might actually dose some of these pollinators with the Beauveria for some reason or another. I forget why. And over here we're like, I don't know about that. we don't want to play with fate there. To spell it out, sorry, that was vague. What I mean is that they could get colonized and it might be bad for the bees. Or other pollinators that visit the flowers afterwards, right? So that's a way that pathogens get around, actually, is on flowers. It's like well, I don't want to make any sort of I don't want to make any rude comparisons, but I think you can use your imagination. Yeah.
Well, what was in my mind was like if it's in your IPM already to be using some predator bugs, that Bavaria is known to be able to infect, then you can kind of ineffectively, if you just continue with your program, you might be able to make that BB, the Beauveria bassiana, persist for longer because it can kind of survive off your predator bugs.
That's an interesting idea. I like that. Like, and on top of that, I want to mention that although a lot of people are familiar with obviously the anti-pest aspect, and there's some direct effects, right, where they like literally just antibiosis, they kill the organism, they parasitize it. but there's also these other interesting like knockoff effects, right? Like these signaling compounds that are produced. You also have promotion of nutrient transfer even, and the biopriming of plant hormones, certain ones. And so that can have just generally, growth enhancing effects to the plant. Of course, I always like to caution that if you don't have the right stuff, or you do it in a certain environment where that might not have been the greatest thing, you can have things prime in the wrong direction, or in a way that might have negative effects. But how much and to what degree is really the crucial question. That's very hard to you can't really ascertain that like just by looking at the plant, right? You have to. That's why that's one reason why research like this is so important. And that's it, unless anyone has anything else to say about that.
Yeah, Beauveria bassiana is a fun one. That's one of the things that we usually keep on hand over at Bokashi Earthworks.
All right. And yeah, again, this was Ortiz Urquiza from
Yeah, no, interesting
Swans-
review, Matthew. I don't want to be like silent is not interesting. It's just less sort of controversy when like research is well done and well presented.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So we had
It's not as much fun to talk about at a certain level, but it's very informative and important nonetheless.
No, I appreciate
It doesn't
I
evoke
didn't
as
get that
much
impression at
discussion
all.
because we don't
No.
have so many things to go through and say, hey, they did this wrong. Maybe they should have done this
Right.
a different way. And I don't know.
We all agree, basically.
We've seen it in Brandon's personal experience, your personal experience, Matthew, and many others out there who've put it to use on their plants. And I think that it's cool to see some science backing up what a lot of people are using. And that's perhaps why they were using it in the first place, because I think that there's already a fairly substantial volume of science supporting the use of Beauveria bassiana and different cultivation settings if you can afford to and reasonably apply it to your plants.
Have to agree. So what's our next one? What does the chat want? Do we know?
It's been so hard
let's
to follow.
go to mine. I want to show the like pictures of mine. Then I think we will want to take a look at that one.
Oh,
And-
that's the Cladosporium one, right?
Exposure
Yeah.
in vitro to I'll
Yeah.
go ahead and I'll share the screen for that. Share screen.
It's
Share.
just and yeah, I didn't get too deep, but they're not even adding it to the soil. They just put it next to the plant. It's so crazy. But if you scroll down, look at the controls compared to the ones that they introduced this product or whatever, this fungus next to. That's what really makes me I'm trying to get a sample of the shit. Boom.
Looks good in agar and even on the plants in the pots.
Yeah, the plants there.
So this is exposure in vitro to an environmentally isolated strain, TCO9 of Cladosporium sphaerosporum, triggers plant growth promotion, early flowering, and fruit yield increase.
It's a bacterium. What family is it in? Does it say?
I believe Cladosporium is a. Do we have it here in the abstract really quickly for
I think
reference?
it's a fungus.
Should be a fungus, right?
Yeah. And there
Just
it
wanted
is
to be
in a little
sure.
cup.
Yeah, I think it's
Wonder if
It says
this one's
fungal growth right
like
here.
Yeah, fungal growth.
oh, this is like a mycorrhizal.
No, Brandon, that's
No.
just
Free living.
yeah, it's a separate
Yeah.
living thing that they put next to the plants. And yeah,
It's like a saprophyte that lives in the soil.
unfucking believable. They don't even put it in the soil.
So
no,
the
it's in vitro, so it's during irrigation stage, and
Crazy.
how long does it stay in contact? I don't remember that. This was
They did
an
it-
article we read a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, they changed. I think they did it 2 different ways, 3 different ways. I didn't. Yeah, I'd have to relook at it, but they say it
The
only needs to
abstract-
be increased once.
should we? I'll read the abstract.
Yeah,
if you
go
want.
for it.
I
Go
can read
through
the
it for
abstract,
us.
Matthew, if you want.
Yeah, let's do it. Oh, I don't mind.
No,
A
you-
growing
I'm just-
number. Oh.
Fine.
Do you want to do it?
Not if you want to. Go ahead.
Okay. A growing number of bacteria and fungi have been found to promote plant growth through mutualistic interactions involving elements such as volatile organic compounds or VOCs. Here, we report the identification of an environmentally isolated strain of Cladosporium sphaerosporum, herein named TC09, that substantially enhances plant growth after exposure in vitro beyond what has previously been reported. When cultured on Murashige and SCU MS medium under in vitro conditions, tobacco seedlings, Nicotiniana tabacum, exposed to TC09 cultures for 20 days increased stem height and whole plant biomass up to 25 and 15-fold, respectively, over controls without exposure. TC09 mediated growth promotion required more than 5 grams per liter sucrose in the plant culture medium and was influenced by the duration of exposure ranging from 1 to 10 days, beyond which no differences were detected. When transplanted to soil under greenhouse conditions, TC09 exposed tobacco plants retained higher rates of growth. Comparative transcriptome analyses using tobacco seedlings exposed to TC09 for 10 days uncovered differentially expressed genes, DEGs, associated with diverse biological processes, including cell expansion and cell cycle, photosynthesis, phytohormone homeostasis, and defense responses. To test the potential efficacy of TC09-mediated growth, promotion on agricultural productivity, pepper plants, Capsicum annum, of 2 different varieties, Cayenne and Mini Sweet, were pre-exposed to TC09 and planted in the greenhouse to monitor growth, flowering, and fruit production. Results showed that treated pepper plants flowered 20 days earlier and yielded up to 213% more fruit than untreated controls. Altogether, the data suggest that exposure of young plants to Cladosporium sphaerosporum produced VOCs and may provide a useful tool to improve crop productivity. Interesting.
It's certainly interesting. I need to know a little bit more about this sucrose that they're adding. It may answer one of the questions, although
that's what I was going to say
not
too.
Likely to, which is where's the energy coming from? I mean, plants can't just suddenly become much more efficient at capturing photons and growing faster than they otherwise would. They can do it for a while, but at the expense of something else, right? And like, giving somebody methamphetamine to make them work harder, that'll work for a few days.
Yeah.
But it's not like a long-term solution to get healthier, more productive workers.
I feel like
so there's just a question of how do you make a machine more efficient, or are you adding more energy? And it looks like in a certain sense they might be adding more energy.
I feel like it's very similar to like your own cells with the different kinds of respiration, right? Like you can do, very aerobic and anaerobic respiration, right? You can do the anaerobic stuff, but only for so long, and then you start to have problems. Right.
Right. And there's just a limited amount. You can't just turn off the volume unless you're turning up the energy from someplace.
So it's 30 grams per liter, according to the Sigma Aldrich, St. Louis, Missouri, United States, S5391, whatever that is, was prepared with pH adjusted to 5.8, 1N KOH prior to addition of 7 grams per liter gelling agar from Sigma A7 921. The medium was then autoclaved, so that doesn't have to do with the sucrose. But to answer your question, that is at least what they gave in the materials and method sections.
I mean, the sucrose is not an effective way to sort of replace plant energy anyways. The sucrose are usually feeding, microbiology in the container that you're growing in the media. You're not sort of providing direct energy to the plant that way. There was an interesting study that came out a while ago.
It could have a biostimulating effect though, where the microbes are maybe creating something like a sidiaphore, which is chelating some of the mineral nutrition that's in that media already. And that's where
That's
you're
not
getting that.
energy.
Yeah, siderophore
Those,
is not the
that's
same.
not carbohydrates. That's not photosynthase.
But
That's
isn't-
not the
isn't
sucrose
sucrose-
itself is. But I don't think the plants can sort of absorb sucrose and use it for energy.
No.
Like the way
What I'm saying is that the biology might be utilizing that, creating metabolites that are maybe chelating some of the mineral
Oh,
elements.
okay. Like how like a regular mutualism, right? The plant sugars are often sucrose, gets exuded out of the roots. They eat that up, and then they do stuff with it, and then some of those
This
products,
to me screams out that there was a suboptimal soil as far as like the ones. I'll just scroll down and show the images that I'm kind of thinking of to describe what I'm talking about.
Oh,
So you
a
see
good
these
example-
control
A
on
good
the
ex-
left,
a
and then
good
you've got the
example
ones
of
on the
that
right.
is going to be like
Hold on, your screen
trichoderma
is
and
scrolling slower
iron,
than you are.
like trichoderma producing sidiophores that help with iron uptake. That's a really good example.
But like just as an example, I have had plants where the soil maybe didn't have a good enough microbial load to allow the nutrients to be uptaken by the plant. So when I added microbes, I could see directly they exploded in growth and they were more green versus like the yellowish before. And I didn't add any nutrients. I just added water and microbes, and the microbes increased the growth. And I use it across all of my plants now, but I had similar results like this where I'd have plants on the right thriving, crushing it, and the plants on the left. I don't know if the color of what the stuff is difficult. I have like a yellow kind of hue on my screen because after a certain time, my
you
computer screen
have
goes.
flux on.
Yeah,
I
but
see.
I don't know. Did the plants on the left look more yellow and the plants on the right look
No,
more
actually,
green?
I don't. We're not getting the flux, which is interesting.
Yeah,
That's good.
I mean, it might just be the reflection or the lighting there, maybe a little bit, Jack, but not really. No.
Yeah, I will say
A difference.
I will say that I feel like you bring up a really good point about both Dr. Coco and also Jack here about how like, and I think this is like a thing that a lot of people like when you say, oh, you used a plant growth hormone, or they use some sort of bad thing that made the plant grow really quickly, but it doesn't have a lot of nutrients. Like that's a criticism people levy at agriculture, right? You grow the plant too fast, quote unquote, and you don't get enough nutrient load into the produce itself. But when you do it with a microbe, suddenly, oh, that's great, that's good, even though the physics of what's happening are identical practically, right? Like if it grows faster, that's good for some things, but not
Isn't the
other
problem
things.
though with
those two plants though, the TC09 plants definitely look healthy and they look like normal growth. They just look like more of it.
Yeah.
No, I thought Jack was going in a different direction.
I can't believe nobody's taught like what Tao opened with and what this article is claiming is that it's from VOCs. It's not like a
right. They're not even putting it on the soil. They're just putting it next to the plants and letting it smell it like.
And
it's making this change. They're saying, yeah, this is crazy.
Can we magnify that? Can we find that somewhere? I'd like to understand how they word.
I'm gonna try.
That's really weird. That's really cool.
I'm trying to get this shit. I want to see what.
And it's just during the tissue culture, right?
Well, propagation. The people
in vitro.
So listen, my BioEgg has this stuff, and they're testing it right now. That's how I learned about it, and then I found this paper. So I'll throw that out there first off. Shout out to the BioEgg and Bob Faust and those guys, but they're doing experiments right now. They're putting it in cloning domes, and they're saying that's where they think that would be the best opportunistic in propagation of clones.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on at all, but I'm saying if they cut the results in half and it's only like 20% quicker and 20 days, like whatever, cut all the numbers in half, it's still an outstanding improvement. And God only knows how it all works, Like I was saying, maybe there's some weird ass quorum sensing
I want
going
to know
on.
how it all works.
Yeah.
Weird ass quorum sensing.
So okay, I just want to understand, because the way that you put it is so fascinating. So they're putting it elsewhere, And just the VOC is, man, this would have been great for a diagram.
Fungal cultures were then removed, and it talks about exposure for 1, 4, 10, or 20 days. Vessels contaminated or containing medium only treated as 0-day served as control. So it's talking about how they're side by side. It's describing it here.
Vessels containing medium only were treated as 0-day and served as a control. All plants were allowed to grow continuously in the vessels until 20 days after introduction of fungal cultures, when growth was measured. The experiment was conducted 2 times. Okay. Okay. Huh. I don't know why I'm not getting the picture of what Tao is describing, I guess. I'm trying to make that connection.
Yeah,
The
the
VOCs
fungus
were
is
good.
put in a cup, and the VOCs that come off of that fungus are, introduced to the plant
Right.
for 10 days, and then they take it away. And the results
And
are
for the
what
rest of
they
that
show.
plant's life, it's supercharged.
Yeah,
It's like primed,
something-
yeah.
Yeah.
Man, so you could just take the fungus out of this equation, just use the box.
Right. You could get a spray.
Right. And they were talking about they don't know if they can measure or evaluate all the VOCs, if it's differing. Like, yeah, it's crazy though. They're just
That
the
is
concept-
neat.
There's something going.
Yeah.
There's some. This isn't too good to be true.
Yeah, that's why I'm intrigued big time.
I feel
Something's
like
going on though.
this is that
But
biopriming I'm
think about
talking
like,
about.
yeah,
Maybe.
steroids or anything else that sort of makes things grow faster. There's always a cost. It comes at some expense because there's a limited amount of sort of energy and resources. And if you push biological organisms in different ways, it comes with a cost. It's hard to believe that you can just expose something to smell something as a baby for a few days, and that's gonna have these effects.
You can't cheat physics.
I don't know.
Here's
can't
where it
cheat
says it in
physics.
plain English, Matthew.
Can't
It
cheat
says
physics.
germinated pepper seedlings were exposed to closure containing TCO9 while culturing on MS medium in GA7 vessels for 20 days, and then transplanted to soil in 8-inch pots. Plants were maintained in greenhouse using standard management practice.
Now, all the
Like
different
growth
plants are
and
treated the same way. Same fertilizer, same watering, same
Wow.
climate, same whatever. Yeah.
That's interesting. That is interesting. I mean, like, maybe not the best metaphor, but like or analogy, I should say, but like there are things that can happen in your young life that maybe affects how you do things. I'm talking mentally mostly, but like,
I
I guess
we don't know what we don't know. So
I guess,
that's like,
but
yeah.
I think it's true though that like, I mean, here's the thing. I think this does really relate to that biopriming thing that I always talk about, which is that like, if you prime too much in one direction, if you happen to be able to do that, like in this case, if that's what's happening, if you're basically causing some sort of an input to direct or stimulate growth in a certain way, like that might on the surface look good until that plant is challenged in a way that if it grew slower and perhaps more solidly in certain ways, like maybe then maybe it will be more vulnerable to things like pests or environmental stressors. Like I think I like what Dr. Coco is saying here is that like I said, you can't cheat physics. There is got to be some sort of a cost to this. Plants are really good at partitioning off costs for fighting off all kinds of stuff and also growing at the same time. They can't stop. They got to do both at the same time, usually for some way, shape, or form. So, but
agronomically,
I'm naturally
they at least
averse to
measured
doing
it
things
well.
that make plants behave in ways that they don't normally behave. I like to sort of give plants what they're asking for, as opposed to and trust the plant to be an efficient allocator of energy. Not
You don't
necessarily
manifold
try.
your
I don't
plants,
like
Coco?
I'm plant growth regulators for the same reason, and try to sort of, I don't know.
But why are you okay with manifolding your plant then? That's regulating it more
there you
than
go.
on its own.
It's interesting to make that comparison.
Well, that's definitely, I mean, a different sort of interaction with the plant in terms of growing it. But I mean, giving it the structure that it wouldn't otherwise have. But You
But
know,
why do we do it? But you're getting to the point. I think you're right, though. Both
in
of you
terms of
smart.
what's healthy,
Say it again.
why do we do so? You say your point.
Oh, sorry. I was just agreeing with both of you that like the answer to that question is why do you do that? And the other answer to that question, or maybe the question for that answer is, why would you think to do it? Why would you want to do it? And if you know what is happening in the plant physiologically, maybe you do that cost benefit analysis and you're like in Dr. Coco's case, sure, you are doing something quote unquote unnatural, but it's a lot more, it's a lot less of a stretch from what it would normally be doing. Whereas maybe in this case, maybe the truly fantastic, and I'm glad you brought this up, Tao, like astronomic growth, maybe that's a little too much. There's actually
Both cases are doing it to try and increase yield. I mean, look at
Yeah,
this one. It says it increasing it will early flowering, but and fruit yield increase. So
Yeah,
in
and-
Dr. MJ's case, he wouldn't just manifold it and top it for the
Yeah.
sake of having fun with his plants. He's doing it to get a uniform canopy of buds and get the
Right.
best yield of uniform tops in his grow space and as quickly as possible for the plant count numbers that we are allowed here in California. So
Mhm.
it makes sense that he does that type of training. If we had no plant count, he might grow differently. He might grow more plants
Yeah.
and not have to top them and shape them out that way. But per our plant count regulations, it makes sense for somebody to, maximize the ability for one plant to produce more on a single plant.
Yeah.
And if you're growing indoor and maybe you have less pest pressure, maybe the point I just brought up about biopriming in the wrong direction doesn't matter when you're getting 200% yield. Maybe that doesn't
Well,
matter. so
hold
much.
on. Let's step
I'm
back
just
and
making
realize
a-
that this is
just a
tobacco and peppers,
hypothetical.
and they're only
Hypothetical.
talking about quantity. So I'd want to
that's
see
true
what
too.
happened with cannabis in the first place.
Right,
I'd
and
love to test the heat
tobacco.
of the pepper and the nicotine of the
Yeah,
tobacco.
what happened
Yeah.
to these peppers? Are they as good as other peppers, or are they kind of like
The
not
midsy
as
ass.
good?
It's
They
like,
have
you
the
know,
same concentration of
Did-
minerals and vitamins and all the rest of that too.
But
Well, we were talking
And
earlier-
in
way better
cannabis
than
sense, does the
dispo
cannabis have the same
Growing
cannabinoids?
mid.
Dry gums?
It was kind of like
Yeah.
earlier we were talking about with growing with certain types of agriculture. It's not that it was grown with synthetic fertilizer that makes the tomato you get at the supermarket different than the tomato that your buddy grows in his backyard. The difference is that they pick it 2, 3, 4 weeks early when it's green.
Yeah.
They ship it with ethylene, and that ethylene turns the product from green to red, and then they put shellac on it and they put that on the shelf so it looks nice and shiny and red. And if you test it for the nutrients, it's almost nothing. It's like a big ball of water with a tiny amount of micronutrients versus one that was grown on the vine. Whether you grew it with salt or organic inputs, the home grower who takes it all the way to harvest where it's vine ripened and they pick it and they eat it that night, the amount of nutrients that they're getting in their body, it's that one tomato covers like 10 store-bought tomatoes. It's ridiculous, the difference
Yeah.
of quality. So when they're just looking at quantity, like Doc had mentioned, it is important to consider that secondary metabolites exist, whether it's fruit, tobacco, or
Right.
peppers, and they're often some of the things that we value the most and the reason that we actually consume them. They might make them
Because
tastier
something's got to
and better
give,
for us.
right? It
Yeah,
can't be all like faster, better, bigger, tastier,
Yeah.
more
The
nutritious.
silver bullet.
None of the cost. All of the
half
benefits.
the time, half the cost. Just
It slices,
like
it
let it
dices.
smell something for a few days. That's snake oil,
Yeah.
guys.
I feel
that
like-
seems to-
I really like that point that you made, Jack, and also you, Dr. Kogu, because and if we looked at some of the other research we looked at as a comparison when the methods are not so great, I could totally see the Cladosporium version of that, right? Where it's all like, well, let's test them out, but we're gonna let the Cladosporium stuff, we're gonna let the fruits ripen, and the other stuff, the store-bought ones that doesn't do that, we're gonna just cut that off, green, and then we'll look at the nutrients. Like, no, you got to compare the process also, because it's all
Apples to apples,
contextual.
so to speak.
Yes.
With that being
exactly.
said, it is that hour where I pass it to Spartan
Already?
Grown. And I know with science, it goes by quick. We spent a lot of time on that first article, and I think a lot of them, it's just so easy to get lost in it. But I got to get Spartan Grown a little bit of a chance to refill his tray, take care of his dogs. If he's actually not at his own house tonight, so maybe he won't have to do as much. But I know you got the Michigan Bros Grow Show coming up in about 15 minutes, so I want to let you get your final thoughts and shout outs in before you get running here.
Thanks, Jack. It was awesome to be on the panel like every week, and I really enjoyed this show. There's a lot of good information here. But yeah, man, I think if those pepper quality, I think no matter what, it's better than the Dispo peppers. So that's probably a little bit better than mids would be my guess. And hey, there's a big market for that. So
Yeah.
not in a lot of the connoisseur market, but that's, hey, there's people that like just, they don't need the highest level of everything. They're just getting into the market. So it could be somebody's medicine, could be, hey, I can grow your medicine for a month, or the matter of I can spray this for a week, 2 weeks in your clone dome, and you just screw your medicine for 2 months. That's kind of big. I don't know. It's interesting. It'll be cool to see what happens with it. But shout out to chat. Chat has been pretty active today, and it's cool to see us grow, man. Shout out to us in 200 episodes. I don't think we really went over that, and I've kind of glossed over it a little bit. But man, 200 episodes. It's a weekly show, so that's 200 weeks. That's
4 years.
That's impressive.
4
So
years.
pat you guys on the back. It's fucking been a great journey. I hope we do, double that. We crush it. So keep on keeping on and keep on growing. Growers love you guys, and we'll see y'all next week.
Thanks for
next
joining us,
Peace
Spartan.
out, Spartan.
Always a pleasure. And 200, it's been a really fun time. The only thing that I plan on changing or doing it differently is I want to do like a can of Jeopardy one night, just fun. I tried to get it ready before this episode, but I was so busy. I mean, I didn't even show up to last week's episode. Things have been crazy with life and travel, but whatever. It's a good position to be in. But other than our regular like science episodes and grow talk and chat Q&A / panelists jumping on with the link, I think it'd be fun to have like a bunch of different categories that are cannabis related, grow related, like strain history type stuff. That's my first place that I go, but we could make it fun. And I think it could be another, once I get the format laid out, it could be something that, you could do like the raise hand feature in Zoom, or just physically raise your hand if you're on the camera and answer the questions. And I think it'd be a fun little change of pace and experience for the people out there. But I guess we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. Do we want to jump into another article at all, or where do you want to take it from here? Do we want to go back to the article that we were just on?
I feel like it's dangerous. If we go to another article, it might be really interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, this one I think we're pretty much done. I'm dumbfounded. I want to investigate it. That's where I'm at with that shit. I want to investigate it anyway.
So I have a
I'm
question
really glad
for
you
the
brought that one up.
audience, I guess, and the chatters can answer this. Like, would you be excited about this as a new offering from your local dispensary? Like, if they were like, now we're growing this what do we call it? The bud that's been exposed to, what is it?
TC09.
TC09.
It's that new strain.
Yeah, we got like the new TC09.
With that new strain.
Is that going to be something that you're interested in trying out, like from the dispensary? Because that's who's going to want to use this, I think. And then my second question, I guess, different question would be, thinking of it as a home grower, is this something that you would want to try on your own plants?
That's a
I'm
yes.
curious to sort of what the reactions are out there.
How different is it from like Micro Plus or Mammoth Microbes or one of these other things that people pour into their plants and get stimulated? In this case,
It's the same kind of thing, massive amounts, but it's different.
But you only give it during the first 10 days of propagation and then never again.
20 days, right? Yeah, 20 days.
That's impressive, though. That's impressive. But I think like Dr. Coco says, there's a physical response that's happening.
It probably has a strong staying effect, right? I mean, for it to be inoculated just for that 10 or 20 days at the very beginning, and then for it to have such a substantial effect that it continues to grow strong all the way through the yield.
A lot of immune responses are not that long. Yeah, a lot of times they last a few hours or a few days. Yeah.
Wait till the second week of flower and then introduce it when they're just putting on their buds, and then let that growth explode. Bam, boom.
What I think might have happened.
The memory is this genetic memory somehow?
I have
Is
no
it,
idea, Doc.
I think what happened is it maybe the
We're gonna have to
roots.
look.
It got a better root base. Think about if your plants, if you have two plants side by side and one's in a cup and you fuck up the roots just a little bit on the transplant, that plant will be slower than the rest of the ones that you transplanted perfectly the rest of the time. So those two that were in like the little control cups, they just never got as strong of a start. So this thing helped them get that strong start, and they were just more vigorous from the get-go, and they just never slowed down. So it's
I don't know if it would grow along with the roots. Maybe it grows along the root with the roots and out in the real world somehow. I don't know.
It could be a phytosphere or the soil.
I wonder
knows,
if like
might be alien.
I feel like this, people, this is how I feel about less symbioses. Like people think like, oh, the microbes are helping the plant. Is that true? Or is it stimulating like in the same way that you might, give something shock therapy? Okay,
right.
Yeah, that sounds very uncomfortable, right? But like
the whip for the horse, man. I mean, the horse doesn't like getting whipped in the ass, but like,
right.
Or a human on steroids too.
It's an effective training tool, aid.
You get roid rage, and then your plants beat you up.
Yeah, exactly. Then it's like feed me,
Yeah, so I just feel like
I started a war in chat, guys. I'm sorry, chat. But no, I'm teasing.
Oh, no.
But it's actually, I was interesting reading these responses. There's definitely some people that are willing to throw it into their garden, right off the bat. So let me find somebody that said that. Like Lone Star Larf said he'd throw it in his garden, and Smoke Your Own came right back with, I'll let you run it first, which seems to be sort of the the sentiment. So yeah, a lot of people I think don't believe it. And
I will say I respect Tao's ability to believe in anything cannabis related. He believed in that little runty, shitty ass plant for
look at that.
a year and a half, and it never grew past a foot tall, and it just died eventually.
Yeah, but
Trevor says I should drink it. I'm gonna get a sample and drink it on camera to show you guys. I'll see.
Oh,
yeah,
that's worth it just to see you on camera, Tao.
That's wild.
This was a good episode to have our 200th episode be.
It was a good, solid episode.
I like that we had a mix of critical, not so good science, and I think some pretty good science as well, and just kind of demonstrating where the pitfalls can be, because a lot of these articles get passed around and posted, and like I showed, screenshotted on Instagram and then made into like a 10-slide thing, and then maybe linked with the authors, maybe not. But it becomes this giant further discussion in the cannabis community, and then sort of accepted as fact, and then never discussed again. And a lot of people take that in their mind and say, outdoor is better than indoor, I guess. So that's my new way of looking. I'm going to start buying outdoor. It's cheaper. It's proven in the scientific study. I read it. Well, I think it's important for us to be able to take 45 minutes and tear apart why that study might not have been the best, and why it is only really a snapshot in time, because even if that was perfectly conducted, and even if it was true for that case, outdoor is very, very broad, and so is indoor. And there's lots of different parameters that play into that. So we're going to see variety from Northern California to Southern California to Oregon to Washington to Michigan and all over the U.S. and everywhere else in the world. The outdoor is very difficult / impossible to control if you're at the will of nature, where indoor, I think a lot of people like it just because the actual look of the bud. So even if the test results didn't align, just generally for most people, most places that don't have the weather to grow great outdoor, their best access to good bud comes from indoor or well done greenhouse. So people get these ideas in their mind that it has to be this way or that way, but when you've been exposed to all of them done well, you can realize like it can all be amazing. And maybe we're just sort of splitting hairs, because they're not even I used to be Mr. Terpene. I figured out the top 10 cannabis terpenes or whatever and thought like, oh, terpene profile matters so much. But then I started learning more about esters, aldehydes, ketones, and flavonoids, and minor cannabinoids. And all these other things play a huge role and very, very rarely discussed, if not ever. Like I've never seen a ketone test. I've never seen a flavonoid test, aldehyde test, ester test, never seen any of those. And like methyl anthranilate is one of my favorite flavors in cannabis, super candy grapey flavor. So we're still a ways away. Just like we don't know a lot about human diet. I think we kind of think that we understand it for a while, and then our understanding of it continues and grows. I think that we're still that way with cannabis at this place because it is still relatively new compared to a lot of the other things that we've been able to study, and we're still not able to legally study it in many places as we would like to. So I think we're going to continue to have a lot of this open discussion and dialogues over what science is being done well, and what's actually, it's hard to nail down any of the facts of the matter with cannabis. Like, even what does it do? Like, if you describe to a non-smoker, how does cannabis make you feel? It can be really tough to like describe even the effect of it. So from that standpoint, it can be really, I guess, spacey, and that's part of the fun of it all. I think that's one of the things we all enjoy. But with that said, we've got about 4 minutes left, and I want to go ahead and pass it to Dr. MJ first to give us final thoughts and shout out.
Yeah, it was an interesting show. I like getting into science. I think there's a real value in sort of analyzing those articles where we take issue with how they were done and the conclusions that they drew from that, because that's a really important skill that's really increasingly what we all need to have with us, and to be analyzing the information that we encounter in the world and be able to judge whether or not it's good, reliable information, or it's just somebody sort of trying to get us to think what they want us to think, for whatever reason. And it's interesting. I mean, I'm not opposed by any stretch, even being an indoor grower, to like outdoor cannabis having some strengths to it or having some benefits to it that indoor cannabis doesn't have. I would love to be able to grow outdoors here. I'd love to be able to have take good science to politicians make an argument for that case. But that study certainly wasn't what that was all about, right? That study was just trying probably to sell more of their product, or to try to make an argument that their product was better than others. So I don't know. It was a very interesting discussion for that. I appreciate the input of all the different panelists on this one. We all bring sort of different experience to it, and I love that we're all willing to sort of call BS when we smell it. So good luck, or good job to everybody out there sort of reading those articles. I enjoyed reading them all. I did not get through all of them though, so I'll try to do a better job with my homework next time. But I am Dr. MJ Coco. I'll wrap up my sort of little monologue here. Dr. MJ Coco, check out my YouTube channel. Come visit us at cocoforcannabis.com. And yeah, I got a couple other cool shows coming up that you guys will be able to track down. I'm doing a two-parter with Mr. Grow It these days, and I'm doing another couple episodes of the Growcast coming up. So check out both of those. And grow with love, everyone.
Grow love. And I think it's interesting, even if the indoor would have won in that study, I would have been calling BS, because just the way that it was conducted. And it almost seemed like a coin toss of like between those two farmers, like the Granny Flora versus like the Moon Mid or whoever was that was involved, the farms that were tested. It's like, hey, we're going to do this study and one of us is going to be able to have bragging rights after, basically.
Yeah.
And other than that, not much that you can take from that study. So that was about all I got from that. And next I'll pass it to Brandon Rust.
What's going on? Thanks again, everybody. It's always a pleasure to be here, sit with the panel, talk science, talk shop, talk about weed, confirm good science, debunk bad science. I am on Instagram at rust.brandon and Bokashi Earthworks. You can subscribe to the Patreon. We're going to be organizing a lot of educational content there. And you can get Beauveria bassiana along with humate fertilizers and all kinds of other microbe products at www.bokashiearthworks.com. I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks again, Brandon. Next up, we've got Matthew Gates.
Yeah, I have to echo most of what Dr. Coco said. I really enjoyed the chat. I'm glad that we have 200 episodes concurrent now. And I really liked the research that we looked at, and I liked that we got to sort of analyze it and critique it. And I think that's very important for all kinds of people to do. And I really like the discussion that it broached. And I also want to say that I'm excited to see more research about indoor outdoor. And I also want to say that I'm excited that we're going to be seeing more of that stuff coming up. And I had a more articulate point to make, but I do not have it. So I will just leave by saying, if you're interested in research and good information about IPM and pests and how to mitigate them, you can check me out at zenthanol.com. For professional inquiries, you can check me out also at Zenthanol, the YouTube channel, for social media and information and presentations and things like that. So learn you some, and I'll look forward to our mutual success.
Happy to have you. And last and certainly not least of the panelists this evening, the American one.
Jack, thanks for hosting. 200 episodes is a feat. Congratulations to everyone on the panel. And thank you to everyone in chat for hanging out with us for 200 episodes. It's pretty amazing. Although I was not here for every single one, I feel like I have been. And yeah, as I say, approach everything you hear, learn, or see with healthy skepticism, but also remember to avoid and identify your biases, because oftentimes it happened to me. I check myself. I see a paper or a news article that like goes right in line with my thinking, and then I I send it to someone or something, and then I'm like, I better look at this, and then I find out it's like totally bogus. So yeah, check your own biases. Don't believe everything that you want to believe, And but I am often amazed by the new findings that they find in real science, and I want to say, yeah, science is great, and I don't say outright disbelieve everything, but check everything and question everything. And yeah, like at a certain point they were saying certain brands of cigarettes were good for the pregnant ones, you know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where I'm at with science and all of that. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it's really a great episode, and yeah, thanks for everyone for hanging, and yeah, that's it, man. Peace out, everybody.
Peace out, Sal. That was a great point to end it on. I just want to say I'm smoking on a lovely joint of grape ape. And if you haven't tried it before, or other grape crosses, it's one that does have lots of that methylanthranolate. It tastes great. Might not be the highest terpene tester, and it definitely won't be the highest THC on the shelf. Sometimes it's even below 20%. But don't let that dissuade you. It's incredibly relaxing. It makes me feel amazing. Great medicine, great pain reliever. As you can probably tell, I'm relaxed, feeling great. Lovely 100 or 200th episode, 400 hours of content that we've delivered. It's been an amazing ride. And I look forward to 200 more. Maybe making it to 1,000 someday. I think the show's going to keep on riding, and I appreciate going through the science with all of you, good, bad, or in between. It's a lot of fun coming together with you guys for anything to discuss cannabis or just hanging out. It's always a great time. So I appreciate you all. This has been an incredible 200, and I'm very, very thankful for not only the panelists, but also the listeners, the chat who's here with us live, and all the podcast listeners. I try to do my best to get that up after as quickly as possible. I know that over half of you guys are on the podcast alone. So to the listeners out there, we thank you. And with that said, you can find me at Jack Greenstock on Instagram, Jack_Greenstock on Twitter. And yeah, hope everybody has a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week. Peace and love, y'all.
Grow love, everyone.
And keep on growing.